I was today years old when I found out that Knights of the Zodiac sounds so much cooler in Spanish. They should have just called it the name in Spanish. Let me read it for you. Los Caballeros del Zodiaco. That sounds awesome. What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and today you're going to get all of my thoughts on Knights of the Zodiac. A huge thank you to Sony Pictures for giving me the chance to watch this early for review, and hey, if you're in the US, you can watch it in theaters as well on May 12th. This live-action movie is adapted from source material found in Saint Seiya, a manga that was popularized in the late 80s and then turned into countless TV shows and different anime that I've learned about over the past couple of weeks. Not all of them have been successful, from what I've heard, but I know that this has a huge fan base in Japan and in South America, so Knights of the Zodiac definitely has a lot of weight that it's carrying, and if you haven't heard of it, well, I genuinely hadn't heard of this movie before Sony Pictures reached out, but I was excited to dive into something new. Now, this movie is directed by Tomasz Baginski, and it's his feature-length debut, and the cast is full of some star-studded personalities like Sean Bean, Famke Janssen, you have Mark Dacascos, and then you have Tinoco, who I got a chance to interview, Mackenyu, and Madison Iseman. Yeah, you heard that right. I interviewed Tinoco, so you're not going to want to miss out on that interview. Find it in the description below or floating around at the top of the screen. But y'all, this movie is very interesting. I can see how it would work in the manga, right? But if you don't know much about the film, we're gonna get into it, I promise. But before we do that, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about movies, TV, and all the news in between. So if you do too, hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this review and want to see so many more, because we're in full swing, guys. Next week I got Fast 10 I'm watching, the Little Mermaid live action film. It's about to go down, and y'all, let me know in the comments below what you thought of Knights of the Zodiac, and if you're a fan, did it do the original source material justice? So the story of Knights of the Zodiac is just like this. When a goddess of war, Athena, reincarnates in the body of a young girl, street orphan Seiya discovers that he is destined to protect her and save the world, but only if he can face his own past and become a Knight of the Zodiac. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I actually really think that the premise here opens itself up for some really cool pieces of storytelling. You can get on the ground level with these characters, and then you can get into the fantasy aspects with Athena reincarnating in the bodies of other people, and then Knights of the Zodiac coming to protect her, and the Pegasus Knight rising up from the ashes. You know, there are some cool story elements that are here just on the surface alone, but did the movie succeed? Well, we'll get into it. So let's begin with my positives, because I'm not going to start off on a negative note here. There were some good takeaways from this movie, like the fight choreography. Stunt coordinator Andy Cheng, who is a legend in the film industry, has worked with Jackie Chan, has worked on movies like Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings, did a good job at making sure everyone was in sync. Heck, I mean, this is the biggest standout in the movie for me, is the fight choreography. Even though the editing is janky around the fighting, you can tell that the stunt work was given some thought. There was a lot put into a lot of these action scenes, and I really enjoyed how they filmed it too, because it kind of looked like an anime to me. If you've seen Creed 3, you know, director and actor Michael B. Jordan was able to kind of film those boxing matches and make it look like an anime and feel like an anime, and you get that here, at least in the first 30 minutes of Knights of the Zodiac. And at times, I will say there are some visuals that work for me as well. Now, we'll talk about the CGI in a little bit, but in terms of the visual elements, the presentation of some themes, I kind of liked how it transported you out of just a real world experience. The armor for all of the knights looks pretty okay, and I will say my favorite piece of armor is Nero's armor. It looks amazing. It's better than the Pegasus Knight's armor in my opinion, and I actually like one set piece here. Now, do I like what goes on in the set piece? Absolutely not. However, when Seiya goes up the mountain for his training, he gets to a certain point of the mountain where he can see off in the distance this rock with a face sculpted in it, and it looks kind of cool. Reminds me of a Shadow of the Colossus type of vibe, and I really enjoyed the presentation well up to that point. And if you're wondering about the acting, well, I'll give some of the actors credit here. It's pretty rough going in this department, so again, we'll talk about this in the negatives, but there are some actors who you can tell are genuinely trying, like Sean Bean, Famke Janssen, and even Diego Tinoco. They're doing their best to eat up scenes. I will say Madison Iseman is unfortunately a victim of some bad writing here, but she at least tries to take on the role of someone who's literally just been, I don't know, reincarnated as Athena, or whatever the case might be. It can get a little muddy sometimes, but for the most part, Madison Iseman, Famke Janssen, Diego Tinoco, and even Sean Bean are trying their hardest here. I really wish that they were utilized better, but you know, you can just tell that they want to break free of this script and the chains that bind them, but unfortunately that does not happen. So we have good fight choreography, bad editing surrounding it, but we do have decent visuals every now and then. The armor can look pretty cool, and I can understand that there is a core story here that has potential to be great. However, this is where we get into the negatives, because outside of all of that, I tried my hardest, of course, to stay positive for as long as I did. But this movie might be one of the worst movies of the year. So far, it is the worst movie I've seen in 2023, so beginning with the negatives, we have to start with the directing and the writing. It's hard to adapt an anime or a manga into live action format because there are some elements that I get you cannot properly make realistic. But here, in this movie, it's just a dud. I mean, the writing is so cheesy at the beginning, and it gets worse from that point on. There are a lot of missed moments and opportunities here. If anything, most of the important story beats are an offhand dialogue. Why not show us these things instead of tell us about them, and why are you burying the lead? And that's a big issue that this movie has and can never really overcome. And then when you look at the directing, I just didn't necessarily understand where they were going. Which direction were you going? Were you just trying to give us a story that was probably submitted as a draft, or are you trying to actually give us a complete three-dimensional story? And we didn't get any of that. I was actually surprised, and not in a good way, that one of the three screenwriters on this movie was a writer for 10 Cloverfield Lane, a movie that I loved. When I saw Josh Campbell's name there, I had a little bit of hope, and then I hit play, and then it was all downhill from there. It just never felt like the movie knew how to utilize the talent on hand, and they did not do the best job at casting some people in important roles. Like I mentioned earlier, Famke Janssen, you have Sean Bean, Madison Iseman, Diego Tinoco. They are all misused, underutilized, and given some really bad material to work with. But there is one actor that does get the short end of the stick every now and then. He's the main character, but feels like a secondary character in his own story, and that is Mackenyu, who plays Seiya. Seiya is supposed to be the Pegasus Knight, and he's supposed to be this big overarching character, and we're supposed to feel for him. But unfortunately, I didn't feel any of those things. And that's due in large part to his acting. Now, this is the first time I've seen him in anything, but I looked at his filmography, and he's not starred in some of the best projects known to man. However, I was not going to go in there closed-minded, I should say. I wanted to go in open-minded, so I did, and his acting is unfortunately very one-note in this movie. He gives the same amount of emotional range from when he is attacked by an enemy to telling somebody he's happy, and that doesn't bode well for a movie that sometimes has to carry some emotional weight with it. He's not able to convey enough for this movie. He's not a lead. And I don't mean to sound rude, but he just isn't. And the fact that he's playing Zoro, a character in One Piece, for the Netflix live-action adaptation of that anime, I almost wonder if maybe this is not a good sign for that series, because you have to imagine that this is a role, especially in Knights of the Zodiac, that is going to require some heavy lifting. And he just couldn't shoulder the load. Now, the budget for this movie is $60 million. You'd have to imagine most of that actually went to the cast because it didn't go to the CGI. And trust me, the CGI here is painful to witness. It's very shoddy. It's not used well. It's all too noticeable. And I just don't know where $60 million goes. I mean, you have to imagine $60 million went to this cast who's got some A-listers here. So I don't know. Maybe that's the issue, is that they could have not cast A-listers and used the budget properly to help convey a better sense of immersion, because I was not immersed in any of the fight scenes, and I wasn't immersed in any of the CGI worlds that were developed. So I don't know, it stinks to see that unfold, because there's a passionate fan base behind Knights of the Zodiac. I know the source material is revered by many, especially those in Japan and South America, like I've already mentioned at the top of this review, but I just don't necessarily think that this movie is doing that source material justice. Even though I'm unfamiliar with it, I'd have to imagine that fans won't be happy with a product like this. And the movie did have some production woes. Apparently, Toei Animation gave the film an official green light in May 2017, with Tomasz Baginski attached as director, but it took a very long time for this movie to even debut. Actually, even before that, it took a long time for the movie to begin filming. Got the green light in 2017, and it began filming in September of 2021. That is just, you know, there's something going on there. Like, that does not sound good. And the movie is, at the time of filming this, only got a box office of 4.5 million. Sure, it hasn't opened up in the US markets yet, but the movie doesn't have its core demographic here in the US, so it's interesting. I don't necessarily think Knights of the Zodiac was a finished product, and if it was, they needed to revamp and start from scratch. It would be better probably not to release the movie in this current state than get what we got and probably dash all hopes for sequels or any future films, because I hate to say this, guys, this movie is not going to do well. Now, do I wish it bad luck and bad fortune? Absolutely not. I want to see this cast succeed. It just hurts because the movie, the final product, is not great, and I will say, for the most part, the issues with this movie come from the writing, the direction, and the CGI. So overall, you guys, what are my final thoughts on Knights of the Zodiac? I gotta say, I can't find enough positives here to tell you this is worth watching. When it hits theaters this weekend, if you're a huge mega fan of Saint Seiya, I think you're going to see this movie anyway, and I will be curious to hear your thoughts. But if you're someone like me who had no prior knowledge going into this and was even intrigued by the premise, you're gonna be let down. It's a movie that really felt undercooked, and I wish it was better, but there are so many red flags prior to this movie with the production issues, and then when you get into the film going in with a clear mind, you can tell right off the top that the writing is not up to snuff, the direction is lost and all over the place, and not even good fight choreography in a star-studded cast can help pick up this movie from the depths in which it's fallen. So Knights of the Zodiac for me is probably a 1 star out of 5. You know, I didn't want to give it a half star because I thought the stunt choreography was really good and some of the actors were genuinely trying. Like, again, Famke Janssen and Diego Tinoco should have got more play. Sean Bean, Madison, Iseman were really desperately trying with the lines that were given to them, and I wish Mackenyu just showed more emotional range to really carry this movie, because he is the central figure, but unfortunately this movie is pretty hollow at its core. So there you have it, you guys. That's my real review of Knights of the Zodiac. Again, it hits theaters in the US this weekend, so let me know down below in the comments if you agree with me or you disagree with me, and hey, hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel for more reviews like this, and I really don't like being negative on the channel, so this is a bummer for me. Alrighty, y'all, again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening. Man, I definitely don't want to be a knight, though. It looks like it's a tough life.